y'all, it's Kim. So this, I believe, is Richard Kahn. He is the attorney for Epstein. And then there's Darren Endike. I mean, these videos are almost 6 hours long. So I'm gonna break these up into maybe like 1 hour slots. Just try to keep an eye on the time because it's a lot, and then I don't want to sit here for that long. But it'll at least give you a chance to watch it in pieces instead of having to sit for 6 full hours, even though you can go back and watch it later, but sometimes YouTube does not start back in the spot that you completed. So anyway, we'll go ahead and let this play. I'll set a timer for about an hour and then we'll see what else we can get recorded today. We'll see. I've got pictures and all kinds of documents. So let me start this.
We'll go on the record. It is 9:58 a.m. This is a deposition of Mr. Richard Kahn conducted by the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform under the authority granted to it pursuant to House Rule 10. Accordingly, House Rule 10 grants the committee broad jurisdiction for the committee to conduct investigations of any matter at any time. On January 7, 2026, the committee voted to approve a motion directing the chairman to authorize and issue a subpoena to you for a deposition. On January 23, 2026, Chairman Comer issued a subpoena for Mr. Kahn to appear today for a deposition in furtherance of the committee's investigation into the actions and investigations of Mr. Jeffrey Epstein and Ms. Ghislaine Maxwell. I will enter the subpoena and corresponding cover letter as Exhibit 1. The committee noticed the deposition for Mr. Kahn on March 4, 2026. I will enter the notice for this deposition as Exhibit 2. Can the witness please state his name and spell his last name for the record?
Richard Kahn, K-A-H-N.
Thank you. My name is Billy Grant, and I am the Deputy Chief Counsel for Investigations for Chairman James Comer. Under the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform's rules, you are allowed to have counsel present to advise you during this deposition. Do you have counsel representing you in a personal capacity present with you today?
Yes.
Will counsel please identify themselves for the record?
Sure. Daniel Rzumna, R-U-Z-U-M-N-A, on behalf of Richard Kahn.
Joshua Berman, B-E-R-M-A-N, on behalf of Mr. Kahn.
For the record, starting with the majority staff and the additional staff members, please introduce themselves with their name, title, and affiliation.
Jack Emmer, Chief Counsel for Investigations, for Chairman Comer.
Peter Spector, Deputy Director of Oversight for Chairman Comer.
Daniel Ashworth, General Counsel for Chairman Comer.
Ryan Giacchetti, Chief Counsel for Chairman Comer.
Will Harness, Professional Staff Member for Chairman Comer.
Hannah Cathy, Professional Staff Member for Chairman Comer. Emily Fireoven, Counsel for Chairman Comer. Ellison Tolan, Counsel for Chairman Comer. Brittany Brilliant, Senior Counsel for Chairman Comer.
Jack Furlock, Counsel for Chairman Comer.
Ashley Mears, Deputy Staff for Chairman Comer.
I'm just gonna say this is just really quick. He looks really, really nervous. He's probably thinking, damn, this guy's been dead forever and I'm still having to deal with this crap. That would be kind of my reaction if the man's been dead forever. Well, for like 6 years. I'm gonna go ahead and plug in this speaker. Hopefully it works. I haven't charged it in a few days, but we'll see. That way maybe it's a little louder. And y'all comment in the comment section and I'll try to adjust it next time. Anyway, let's start it back up. Sorry. Just my observation.
And would the members of Congress please introduce themselves?
James Coburn from Kentucky.
James Walkinshaw, Virginia.
Thank you all. Mr. Kahn, before we begin, I would like to go over the ground rules for this deposition. The questioning will proceed in rounds. The majority will ask questions for an hour, and then the minority will have an opportunity to ask questions for an hour if they choose. To the extent members have questions for the witness, they will be propounded during their side's respective rounds. The clock will stop if you need to confer with counsel, your counsel is speaking, and when members or staff are speaking during the opposing side's round of questions. We will alternate back and forth until there are no more questions. Do you understand?
Yes.
There is a court reporter taking down everything I say and everything you say to make a written record of the deposition. For the record to be clear, please wait until the staffer questioning you finishes each question before you begin your answer, and the staffer will wait until you finish your response before proceeding to the next question. Further, to ensure the court reporter can properly record this deposition, please speak clearly, concisely, and slowly. Also, the court reporter cannot record nonverbal answers, such as nodding or shaking your head. So it is important that you answer each question with an audible verbal answer. Do you understand?
Yes.
Exhibits may be entered into the record. Majority exhibits will be identified numerically. Minority exhibits will be identified alphabetically. Do you understand?
Yes.
We want you to answer our questions in the most complete and truthful manner possible, so we will take our time. If you have any questions or do not fully understand the question, please let us know. We will attempt to clarify, add context to, or rephrase our questions. If we ask about specific conversations or events in the past and you are unable to recall the exact words or details, you should testify to the substance of those conversations or events to the best of your recollection. If you recall only a part of a conversation or event, you should give us your best recollection of those events or parts of conversations that you do recall. Do you understand?
Yes.
You are required by law to answer questions from Congress truthfully. This also applies to questions posed by congressional staff in this deposition. Do you understand?
Yes.
If at any time you knowingly make false statements, you could be subject to criminal prosecution, including but not limited to perjury. Do you understand?
Yes.
This includes both knowingly providing false testimony, but also stating that you do not recall or remember something when in fact you do. Do you understand?
Yes.
Furthermore, you cannot tell half-truths or exclude information necessary to make statements accurate. You are required to provide all information that would make your response truthful. A deliberate failure to disclose information can constitute a false statement. Do you understand?
Yes.
Is there any reason you are unable to provide truthful testimony in today's deposition?
No.
Please note that if you wish to assert a privilege over any statement today, that assertion must comply with the rules of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. Pursuant to that, Committee Rule 16C1 states, for the chair to consider assertions of privilege over testimony or statements, witnesses or entities must clearly state the specific privilege being asserted and the reason for the assertion on or before the scheduled date of testimony or appearance. For the purposes of the deposition, objections must be stated concisely and in a non-argumentative and non-suggestive manner. If the witness refuses to answer a question to preserve a privilege, the committee may seek a ruling from the chair. If the chair overrules any such objection, the witness shall be ordered to answer. If the witness continues to refuse to answer a question, despite being ordered to do so, the witness may be subject to sanction. Do you understand?
Yes.
Ordinarily, we take a 5-minute break at the end of each hour of questioning. But if you need a longer break or a break before that, please let us know and we'll be happy to accommodate. However, to the extent that there is a pending question, we would ask that you finish answering the question before we take the break. Do you understand?
Yes.
Finally, I will note for everyone here today that the contents of what we discuss in the deposition today is confidential under the House Deposition Regulation.
I made a mistake. He's actually the accountant, known as the longtime accountant of Jeffrey Epstein and named as a joint executor of his estate alongside Darren Endike. Sorry. That's what his role was. For some reason, I thought he was an attorney, but I knew he had something to do with the estate. Sorry.
Under the rules, the chairman and ranking minority member shall consult before any release of testimony or transcripts, including portions thereof. This means it is a violation of House and committee rules to disclose content of the deposition prior to its official release. For this reason, the marked exhibits that we will use today will remain with the court reporter so that they can go into the official transcript, and any copies of those exhibits will be kept at the table or returned to us when we wrap up. Can the reporter please swear in the witness?
Yes, sir. Sir, will you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have any other questions before we begin?
No.
Mr. Kahn would like to make a statement before we begin. It's an opening statement. I have to give a copy to the court reporter as well.
We'll mark this statement as Exhibit 3.
I would like to thank the committee for the opportunity to testify and thereby try to set the record straight on a number of important points. Because I expect the committee has many questions, I will keep this statement brief. First, In the years that I provided outside accounting and bookkeeping services for Jeffrey Epstein, I was not aware of the terrible and unforgivable things that he did to women and girls. My relationship with Epstein was strictly on a professional level. We did not interact socially, and I never attended any of his parties or his social functions. While Epstein was alive, I never observed any sexual abuse or trafficking of women and never received a complaint either by one of Epstein's victims or anyone else of such abuse or trafficking. Epstein told me that his 2006 arrest was a mistake, that he did not know the woman was underage, and that nothing like that would happen again. I believed him at the time and never saw what appeared to be a minor in his presence. Had I learned of any of his horrific behavior, I would have quit work immediately. Second, in the work that I performed on behalf of Epstein or his companies, I did not see anything that suggested to me that Epstein was abusing or trafficking women or otherwise acting unlawfully. I worked with other accountants and bookkeepers to track spending on Epstein's properties and other assets. And in the few years before Epstein's death, I also tracked his investments. With homes in the Virgin Islands, New York, Palm Beach, Paris, and New Mexico, and with several planes and a helicopter, Epstein had substantial yearly expenditures and a large staff. We tracked the expenditures as meticulously as possible, including gifts by Epstein to women and men. The gifts represent a very small fraction of Epstein's spending. I did not see them as red flags for abuse or trafficking. Third, some media sources have reported that Epstein used corporate structures and cash to conceal his identity and hide his sexual abuse and trafficking. Based on my experience and conversations with financial officers for family offices, the use of limited liability companies by wealthy individuals to hold assets such as real estate or major assets like airplanes and helicopters is completely standard practice. I had no role in setting up any of Epstein's companies, but did not view them as improper or suspicious. Like all expenditures, we tried to closely track the use of cash at Epstein's properties, and where backup was missing, we treated cash and other expenditures as gifts by Epstein and reported them when appropriate on Epstein's gift tax returns. Finally, I agreed to serve as co-executor of Epstein's estate. By the time of Epstein's death, I had learned of the harm that he had caused to so many women and thought that my knowledge of Epstein's holdings would make me better prepared to alleviate some of their suffering. One of the first things my co-executor and I did was set up the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, which resolved claims by over 130 women in a confidential manner without limits as to their recovery and without any decision-making by the estate. We also settled nearly 60 claims by Epstein's victims. I have done my best to balance my obligations as a fiduciary of the estate with the interest in providing legitimate compensation to Epstein's victims. For this work, I have been the subject of attacks by plaintiffs' lawyers, and I've had my reputation dragged through the mud. It has taken a tremendous toll on me and my family, but I continue to serve as co-executor because I believe it is the right thing to do. I was not aware of the nature or extent of Epstein's abuse of so many women until after Epstein's death. However, it pains me to think, and I deeply regret, that I may have unknowingly assisted Epstein in any way. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we begin, will the additional members of Congress who joined us please identify themselves for the record?
Representative Srivastava. Rob Tanner from California.
And for the additional person that just walked in, will you please identify yourself for the record? Thank you. The clock reads 10:11 a.m. and the majority's time will begin now. Mr. Kahn, thank you for appearing here today. I'm going to get started with just some brief background information on you. Can you tell us where you went to college?
I went to Syracuse University.
And what degree did you graduate with?
An accounting degree.
Did you, after graduating from Syracuse, did you obtain any other professional degrees or licensures or anything like that?
I later obtained a master's degree in taxation from Pace University.
And what year was that?
I don't recall the exact year, maybe late 90s, 99.
And after these degrees, can we briefly go through your professional career prior to you joining, prior to you starting employment with Mr. Epstein?
Yes.
Can you just walk through that for us, please?
Certainly. After college, I worked for 3 public accounting firms. The first firm was Coopers & Lybrand, which at the time I believe was a Big 4 accounting firm. The next firm I worked for was Richard Eisner and Company, a mid-sized firm. And then I worked for a small firm called KNHN.
And when did you join, or when did you first become employed with Mr. Epstein?
I interviewed for a job with Epstein in October of 2005.
And when did you first meet Mr. Epstein?
I met him in October of 2005. I don't recall the date, and I believe I started employment about 2 weeks later.
And when you first met him, can you explain where that was and what you were doing?
Yes, I was at the time, I had reached out to recruiting firms looking for an accounting or a CFO job. And I believe I was looking at the Times and came across a recruiter who advertised for a job as an accountant bookkeeper. And I did not know when he said to me that I was going to have an interview who it was. And I found out about 30 minutes before the interview that I was going to be interviewing with Jeffrey Epstein. And my first interview with Epstein was at his townhouse. I don't recall the date or the time, but it's sometime in October 2005.
And what did you discuss during that interview?
I don't recall the exact conversation. I believe the interview lasted about 10 minutes with Epstein asking me questions about my previous employment.
Did you know anything about Mr. Epstein prior to that interview with him?
I believe in the 30 minutes before the interview, I saw that there was one article about him. I think it was the International Man of Mystery article.
Was anyone else present during your interview with Mr. Epstein?
Not that I recall.
Anyone greet you at the door when you walked in for your interview with Mr. Epstein?
It certainly wasn't him, so someone must have, but I don't recall who that was.
What were your first impressions of Mr. Epstein?
Dork.
It was a very quick interview. So I didn't really have much impressions. It was I was used to longer interviews, so it was very brief, and I had a tough time knowing after the interview if it was someone that was interested in hiring me or not. So it was unknown of what was going to take place going forward.
And who informs you that you were officially hired for the job?
I believe the recruiter reached out to me.
The recruiter.
What did you understand Mr. Epstein's job to be at the time that you started working with him?
I understood that he was providing financial, tax, and estate planning to clients.
Did you know anything about Mr. Epstein's background when you first started working with him, as in, his past of where he had previously worked, where he went to school, things like that?
I believe I knew that and I don't know, maybe it was from the coworkers that told me that he worked at Bear Stearns previously. I also understand that he did not finish his college education.
And at the time of you first beginning employment with Mr. Epstein, did you already understand him, Mr. Epstein, to be a wealthy individual?
I knew he was a wealthy individual from at least some of the assets he had, homes, planes. But at the time I began working for Epstein, I was pretty much focused on bookkeeping and dealing with his insurance and investments outside of stocks and bonds. So at that point in time, I was not preparing asset summaries for him and was unaware of his net worth or the value of his brokerage accounts.
And you mentioned handling his investments outside of stocks and bonds. What sort of investments would those be?
If Epstein wanted to invest in a newspaper or a magazine, if he wanted to invest in a private company, I would usually be the point person to maybe look at the financial statements before he made the investment or while he was holding the investment to monitor the investment on his behalf.
And did Mr. Epstein ever invest in any newspapers or publications?
I believe that Epstein invested with Mort Zuckerman in Radar magazine.
Any other publications?
There was another investment, which I don't recall if it was Epstein or one of his clients, but a company by the name of Seed Media Group.
And what did Seed Media Group do, to your understanding?
I believe it originally was doing scientific analytics and then maybe pivoted into a magazine. I don't recall the specifics, but that is my general understanding.
During your time working with Mr. Epstein, did you develop a personal relationship with him outside of work?
Mr. Epstein and I never socialized. I did not have a personal relationship with Epstein, and my dealings with Epstein were quite infrequent. I would typically meet with him about every 3 weeks for anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes. And our conversations were 90% regarding the questions I brought in and was looking to get answered regarding his accounting and financial situation.
Did you ever at any point consider Mr. Epstein to be a friend of yours?
No.
And you mentioned that you would meet on approximately a 3 weeks or so cadence in person. Outside of those physical face-to-face meetings, how often would you otherwise communicate with Mr. Epstein?
I would say that 80% of my communication with Epstein was on email. And the remaining was phone calls. I could probably count on one hand the amount of times I called Epstein. It was always him calling me. And that was the extent when he would call me on the phone, email, and then in-person meetings.
And the in-person meetings, where would those most frequently occur?
After 2010, I began in 2005. These in-person meetings were always at his townhouse in New York.
And you specifically broke out a portion of time after 2010. Prior to 2010, where were a majority of those meetings take place?
Well, I began work in 2005, and I believe that Epstein was incarcerated in, I believe, June of 2008. So for the period of time, 2005 to 2008, Those meetings were at our office at 457 Madison Avenue.
And did the nature of your relationship with Mr. Epstein ever change over the course of your years of employment with him?
My relationship with him was always strictly professional. We never had a personal relationship or socialized, so I don't believe it changed at all.
And how long did you work for Mr. Epstein?
I worked from October 2005 through the date that Epstein was incarcerated, and then I continued to serve as co-executive.
And when did you officially become co-executor of Mr. Epstein's estate?
I believe that occurred in August 2019.
So sometime shortly after his death?
Yes.
When was the last time you communicated with Mr. Epstein prior to his death?
I believe that Epstein was in Paris prior to him flying back and being arrested in New Jersey on July 6th. I believe I spoke with him probably or communicated via email or phone in the 3 or 4 days prior to his arrest.
You know why Mr. Epstein was in Paris at that time?
No.
And at the time of that last discussion, what were the two of you discussing?
I recall this from seeing recent media reports, but we were discussing his pursuit of a property in Morocco.
And what about that pursuit of the property in Morocco?
Epstein was looking to purchase a property in Morocco and was giving me instructions on what amount of money to wire to his real estate representative based on what I believe was a purchase of a home in Morocco.
And did you ever visit Mr. Epstein while he was incarcerated after his arrest in July of 2019?
I never visited Epstein in 2019 or 2008.
When was the last time you saw Mr. Epstein in person?
I don't recall a specific date. My presumption would be it would be within 2 or 3 weeks of his arrest, but I can't specify a date.
And understanding you can't specify a date, do you know why you met with Mr. Epstein in person at that time?
My meetings with Epstein were, as I said earlier, usually every 3 weeks, and I was handling a lot of things on behalf of Epstein at the time. So I typically would come into a meeting with a list of 30 to 50 questions, looking to get answers. The purpose of almost every one of my meetings was to try to work down my list and get answers to things that I was working on.
And those 30 to 50 questions you would often ask, what types of questions would you be asking at that time?
If an employee was looking for a raise and they came to me, I was going to ask if he was interested in giving a raise, if he was doing construction at a property, and the contractor was looking for payments for the agreements. I wanted to make sure he was comfortable with the work in place. If I was renewing his aviation insurance policy, I wanted to let him know what the premiums were for the next period of time. Those were some examples.
Would some of these questions involve disbursements of payments to or from entities of Mr. Epstein's to various employees as well?
I'm not sure I understand what your question is.
as part of these 30 to 50 questions that you would ask Mr. Epstein, you mentioned that you talk about raises or construction projects and their payments, insurance policies, and renewing them. Would you also discuss any type of payments that you would okay to go from one of the entities of Mr. Epstein to individuals on the payroll?
Well, if the individual was on a payroll, the payment would be the same every week, unless that person was asking for a raise. If you're asking if Epstein wanted to wire money to an individual and maybe was it or wasn't on the payroll, those were never questions that I initiated or asked. Those were usually directives I received from Epstein.
Understood. Did you have any knowledge or suspicion that prior to August of 2019, you would become co-executor of Mr. Epstein's estate?
Not that I recall. There were earlier documents, I believe, that I was in, but I don't recall that I would be the co-executor, the named co-executor, when he changed his documents a few days before his death.
And did you subsequently review any documents that would have indicated when this decision would have been made to name you as co-executor?
I believe that after Epstein's death, I was asked if I would take on the role as co-executor and co-trustee. And I thought about it for a little period of time, and I believe I signed the documents maybe 10 to 15 days after his death.
And were you surprised that you were named to be a co-executor of his estate?
No, I wasn't surprised.
And why were you not surprised?
I wasn't surprised because I thought performing accounting and bookkeeping services on behalf of Epstein, I would be best suited to know his assets.
And sorry to jump around in the timeline here, but in 2005, Mr. Epstein was, the investigation into Mr. Epstein in Florida began. I know you started your employment with Mr. Epstein in 2005. Prior to his arrest in 2006, were you aware of any investigations into Mr. Epstein?
I was not aware of any investigations, nor was I aware of the fact that Epstein was arrested. I found out about Epstein's legal problems when we had a discussion in 2008.
And who was part of that discussion in 2008?
The discussion was Epstein and myself.
And what did you discuss?
Epstein said he wanted to talk with me and mentioned that he was having legal problems in Florida. And he mentioned that he was with a woman that turned out to be a minor, and that he was going to be charged with soliciting a minor for prostitution. Epstein then told me that it was a mistake, that he was with this minor, and that it would never happen again.
Where did this conversation occur?
I don't recall where it occurred. That's the conversation that I recall.
Was it, do you recall if it was in person or over a phone or anything like that?
I don't recall.
And when Mr. Epstein informed you of his legal problems and that he had been with a minor, were you surprised by that fact?
Yeah, I was surprised. I've just been working for this man for a few years. So it was shocking to me, and it was quite upsetting. I know at the time that the crime was very serious. However, his sentence was rather light. I believe he served 13 months, of which he was allowed to leave the county jail 6 days a week for 12 hours a day. So I didn't fully grasp at the time, nor was I aware of the depth of what actually took place that I later learned as co-executor. But at the time, I unfortunately and regrettably trusted Epstein that this would never happen again. And I decided to stay working for him.
And did Mr. Epstein inform you of the interaction he had with this minor woman at that time?
The only thing he told me, excuse me, he was mistakenly with a minor, and that he would never be with a minor again. That was a mistake on his part.
But no specifics about what he was doing with this minor?
No.
Did you discuss Mr. Epstein's legal problems with anyone else at that time?
I don't recall having any other substantive conversations with anyone else, and I don't believe I knew much more than what Epstein told me.
You didn't discuss his legal issues with anyone else that you worked with?
I think everyone was, alarmed and scared that their employer was arrested, but there may have been some office chatter, but I can't recall a specific conversation.
And did you discuss how his legal problems and subsequent incarceration would affect his financial accounting?
Well, at the time, Epstein wanted to continue to employ everyone. He didn't want to fire people. And I know at the time, everyone that continued working for him received a pay cut of, I believe, 10%. And that was, what I recall from the time period. And additionally, that because Epstein was incarcerated, the amount of work that we all had diminished probably by about 30 or 40%.
And so outside of the 10% pay cut that employees faced, what other financial operations were changed during this time period of his incarceration in 2008?
Well, I would say, a lot of the transactions and work that would occur was when Epstein moved from property to property. So, for example, if Epstein was in New York and heading down to the U.S. Virgin Islands, to his islands, the property managers would want to make sure that the house was meticulous and that the landscaping was perfect and there was food in the refrigerator, and they were able to accommodate Epstein and whoever he was traveling with. So there was a lot of work done in anticipation of Epstein moving from home to home, which would lead to more expenses and me having more interactions with the household staff if they needed an increase on their credit line, or they needed cash to pay for bills or get things ready or purchase flowers. So in that regard, because he wasn't moving around from property to property, the amount and volume of transactions and work was diminished.
And did you receive a pay cut during this time?
Yes.
10%?
Yes, every employee did.
And what was your pay at this time?
I believe my salary was $180,000, or somewhere in the $180,000 range. It could have been 185 or 190. I believe my starting salary was $180,000.
And I think you briefly touched on this, but after learning of Mr. Epstein's legal troubles, you, of course, ultimately decided to continue your employment with Mr. Epstein. Did you ever consider leaving or discuss leaving your employment?
Yes, 100%. I apologize for not alluding to that earlier. I, without a doubt, questioned leaving him. And in hindsight, I regret that I relied on Epstein's word that this would never happen again. And I believe at the time we were in the middle of a financial crisis and I had a family to support. So I made the wrong decision in working for him, because I later learned as co-executor that Epstein continued to abuse hundreds of minors and adults. So I made an improper decision.
And you briefly, I think, touched on this before, obviously knowing that you started in 2005 and before Mr. Epstein formally came to you with his legal troubles in 2008. Did you suspect that he was ever trafficking women, sex trafficking women, or abusing women or girls in any way?
No, I never suspected any of that.
Did anyone in Mr. Epstein's orbit ever express concern to you about Mr. Epstein and his dealings with women before his 2008 conviction?
Before his 2008 conviction, I never saw minors in the presence of Epstein. On my visits every 3 weeks when Epstein was in town, occasionally I saw assistants, but I never saw anything that looked improper. In addition, no woman has ever come to me and said that she was in danger, that she was being sexually abused or sexually trafficked.
And just so that the record is clear, saw no minors, no women outside of, or I'm sorry, no minors or girls present with Mr. Epstein at any time.
No, I'm not saying that I never saw minors. I'm saying, let me rephrase that. I never saw minors in Epstein's presence. Period. Correct. Yes, that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that occasionally, when Epstein was in the office, I did see his assistants, and no one ever approached me, communicated with me, and said that they were in danger or that they were being sexually abused or trafficked by Epstein.
Is it fair to say the assistants were adult females?
Correct. Yes.
When did you become aware that Mr. Epstein had to register as a sex offender following his arrest and incarceration in 2008?
I believe I became aware, I assume, after he was to be released from jail.
And who did you learn that from?
I learned that from his attorney, Darren Endyke. And the context of how I learned that was that as a registered sex offender, he was required to make a list of all of his phone numbers, I believe all of his transportation, his planes, his cars, and I believe a list of his properties as well. So at times, Darren Endyke would ask me questions about his properties or phone numbers or his aviation or cars.
What sorts of questions regarding the phone numbers, cars, properties, and aviation vehicles would you be answering or providing?
I believe there was a base list that Mr. Endyke had, and if Epstein had purchased a new car, I assume it would have to be added to the list. So he might say to me, you know, has Epstein sold or purchased any cars in the last, you know, I don't know the period that he was reporting. So those were the questions I would be asked.
When did you first meet Ghislaine Maxwell?
I met Maxwell probably within the first, I'd say, 2 months of working for Epstein.
And what was the context of that first meeting?
I don't recall the context of the first meeting. I believe I was probably introduced to her. And that was the extent of my first meeting with her.
Introduced to Miss Maxwell by whom?
I don't recall.
Do you know where this meeting with Miss Maxwell took place?
It would have had to take place at the office because that's where I was every day.
And what did you discuss with Miss Maxwell in your first meeting?
As I said before, I don't recall the conversation, but my dealings with Maxwell when she was working in Epstein's office were predominantly regarding, she was a signatory on Epstein's accounts, and I would receive from Epstein's properties stacks of invoices, of which I would review. And after I reviewed them, I would either bring them to her if she was at her desk, or leave them on her desk for her to sign the checks and review them as well.
Were you surprised that Ms. Maxwell was a signatory on accounts?
I knew Maxwell to be the equivalent of Epstein's chief of staff. So that was I was explained that she was number 2 to Epstein. So no, I wasn't surprised.
And at the time of your first interactions with Ms. Maxwell, what was your understanding of what she did for a living outside of performing a chief of staff like duty, as you just explained?
My understanding was that she had signatory authority, so she reviewed bills. And when I use the word chief of staff, I mean that she would travel with Epstein. She would interact with the property managers and the staff to make sure that the properties were the way Epstein wanted the properties to be. And that she, on occasion, traveled with Epstein as well.
And throughout your relationship or employment with Mr. Epstein and working with Ms. Maxwell, did her role as sort of a chief of staff or a number 2 to Mr. Epstein, did that ever change?
Yeah, I believe that she was no longer involved in Epstein's day-to-day operations sometime, I want to say the 2009 to 10 range.
Do you know why her role changed in that 2009 to 2010 range?
I was never informed why her role changed, no.
Were you surprised that Ms. Maxwell was no longer handling day-to-day things for Mr. Epstein anymore?
It's not something that I really thought about.
A person you would review invoices for and provide them to for final sign off. You didn't think about why she was leaving her role or her involvement in the day-to-day of Mr. Epstein?
I don't know why she left her role in the day-to-day. What I can tell you, though, is when Epstein was incarcerated, Maxwell had asked if I could help her with some of her finances. And I helped her organize her finances, sometimes during my working day and sometimes after work. I helped her organize her assets, her investments, her brokerage accounts, her cash, her insurances, her payroll. And I did that for a period of time. And after a period of time of doing that work, I was not paid by her, and I felt like my work was not appreciated. So I told Epstein that I no longer want to do work for Maxwell, and he said, great, don't do work for Maxwell. And that was the end of my dealing with Maxwell.
Do you ever have the impression that Ms. Maxwell and Mr. Epstein had a romantic relationship with each other?
I was never aware of Epstein's romantic relationships, but there was, I'd say, office chatter, or people said that at one point in time they did have a romantic relationship, but I can't say I know that with confidence.
Do you recall who would have been engaging in this office chatter talking about their relationship?
Could have been any of the 6 to 10 employees that were in the office. I don't know.
And how would you characterize your relationship with Ms. Maxwell?
Our relationship was, cordial. But as I said just previously, at the period of time where Epstein was incarcerated and I was doing work for Maxwell, working very hard and not being paid, I felt my work was underappreciated. So I had no desire to deal with her at that point in time anymore.
Would you consider Ms. Maxwell a friend?
No.
Would you consider yourselves close?
No.
How often would you, knowing that after you provided services to Ms. Maxwell and then no longer wanted to provide those services, prior to that, how often would you see Ms. Maxwell?
Prior to that?
Yeah.
I'd see probably Maxwell at the same cadence I saw Epstein. I might see her every 2 or 3 weeks. I don't recall specifically, but it was not often.
And outside of face-to-face interactions, how frequent would you communicate with Ms. Maxwell?
Not frequently at all.
If you did communicate with her, what would you use to communicate with her? Phone, email, text message, etc.?
Similar to Epstein, I rarely ever called Maxwell. It would either be email or in-person meeting.
Did Ghislaine Maxwell ever try to introduce you to any women or girls during her time in Mr. Epstein's orbit?
No.
Did Ms. Maxwell ever ask you to introduce her to any women or girls in your orbit?
No.
When, let me go back. So you provided some financial services to Ms. Maxwell in the 2009-2010 timeframe, you said, and after you felt that your work wasn't valued, you no longer wanted to work with her. Is that when your relationship, professional or otherwise, ended with Ms. Maxwell?
I believe that is correct. That after that, there may have been an email here or there, but I was no longer providing services, nor did I feel the need to communicate with her at all.
And when was the last time you communicated with Ms. Maxwell?
I don't recall. Probably sometime in the 2010 range. I don't recall any substantive emails or conversations thereafter.
Prior to Ms. Maxwell leaving Mr. Epstein's orbit in the 2009-2010 timeframe, was Ms. Maxwell heavily involved in Mr. Epstein's business dealings?
When you say the word business, do you mean financial stocks and bonds, or do you mean his properties and caretakers?
Let's start with the first one, stocks, bonds, investments, etc.
I don't recall Maxwell being involved with his investments at all.
And then with his properties, assets, airplanes, vehicles.
That was the majority of what I understood her role to be, yes.
And she was primarily performing functions of a signatory on invoices and payments?
Well, she was more than just a signatory. She's someone that had signatory authority at the banks, but she was also interacting with the pilots, with the property managers to make sure that the properties were to Epstein's liking, and if they needed to purchase something, she would be, generating or initiating that process.
You mentioned there were 6 to 10 people in your office in this, I guess, pre-2009-2010 timeframe. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, that is correct.
And with those 6 to 10 people in your office, would they have routinely communicated with Jeffrey Epstein?
Could you explain what you mean by routinely?
Were they on their own accord having conversations, meetings, phone calls, emails with Mr. Epstein?
I can't speak on behalf of others. I will say that for the time that I worked in Epstein, was my client, everyone had their own relationship with Epstein. So, my involvement with Epstein would be regarding whatever I was working on at the time, his properties, his construction projects, his planes, later in my employment, his investments. But another individual or an accountant might be talking about his investments. The meetings when we were working at 457, were more one-on-one with Epstein. Later thereafter, we would have group meetings at his townhouse.
Who would be at those group meetings at his townhouse?
The group meetings were typically myself, Darren Endyke, Bella Klein, Harry Beller, Imad Hanna, it is Hanna. Our IT person, I believe at the time it was William Murphy, Leslie Groff. There may have been one or two more names, but that's what I remember.
And Mr. Endyke was Mr. Epstein's primary attorney, is that correct?
That's my understanding.
And what role did Ms. Klein provide?
She was a bookkeeper for Epstein.
She worked with you primarily?
Well, we all worked for two companies over the years. But she, as I was saying earlier, everyone had their own relationship with Epstein. So we all kind of had our own roles. We would work together because we were both accountants and bookkeepers, but I didn't view her as my assistant. We kind of each had our areas that we worked on.
And by saying that she was a bookkeeper, what does that mean?
She kept the QuickBooks file for Epstein. She handled his checks. She handled his credit cards. She handled his petty cash. She paid bills on behalf of Epstein personally, as well as many other entities.
How did her role differ from your role?
So that was her role. So I didn't do any of that stuff. My role would be reviewing checks from properties, bills that came in, dealing with property managers. As I said earlier, reviewing his investments, dealing with Epstein's insurance for himself and for his employees, his health insurance, his dental insurance, his property insurance, his aviation insurance, his life insurance. I dealt with construction projects. When Epstein was decorating a property, somehow I inevitably always was involved with the architect, engineer, or designer. I was involved with Epstein if he was hiring employees and hiring a recruiter. I would be the point person. So I did many functions, but none of the functions that Bella Klein did.
And Mr. Beller, what was his role?
Mr. Beller's role was specific to Epstein's investments in stocks and bonds and derivatives. Mr. Beller provided the accounting for Epstein for his personal investments as well as his clients.
And Ahmad Hanna, what was his role?
Ahmad Hanna was like a project controller. So, he would focus on big projects and really interface with the employees. And some of the stuff that I mentioned that I did, Ahmad Hanna used to do previously, but when he left employment, I started doing that. So if Epstein wanted to purchase a car for himself or for an individual, Ahmad Hanna would handle that. But I later assumed those responsibilities when he was no longer employed.
And as a project controller, I presume that includes things like purchasing vehicles. What else would that include?
Purchasing vehicles, if at one point in time, Epstein was doing a lot of construction on his island, Little St. James, and they set up, I guess what they call a batch plant, where they were making cement live on the property. I guess it was more cost effective. So Epstein must have hired 30, 40 people at the time, and he was involved dealing with the construction manager and making sure that the costs were in line and setting up budgets and timelines for the start to the finish of that project.
And when you first started with Mr. Epstein in 2005, were you part of the New York Strategy Group?
Yes, the first entity that I worked for was New York Strategy Group.
And generally, what did the New York Strategy Group do as a whole?
New York Strategy Group was an entity that provided accounting, bookkeeping, and legal services for Epstein.
And does New York Strategy Group still exist?
No.
Why does it not still exist?
I believe it was dissolved in around 2012. I don't know why it no longer exists, but I do know that the two entities that followed after New York Strategy Group were HBRK Associates, which I was part of, and that was the accounting and bookkeeping services. And the next entity was, I believe, DKI PLLC, which was the legal entity that was run by Darren and I.
What does HBRK stand for?
HB is Harry Beller, RK is Richard Kahn.
And you mentioned when you first started, you worked at the 457 Madison Avenue location. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did Mr. Epstein have an office there during that time?
Epstein had an office at 457 Madison from the time I started up until the time he was incarcerated.
How often would he come to the office?
About every 3 weeks.
And did the rest of the staff, including you, Mr. Beller, Mr. Endyke, and Ms. Klein, all have an office at 457 Madison?
At 457 Madison, I believe it was 4 rooms. There was one room that was the accounting room, and that was myself. It was Bella Klein, Harry Beller, and Emad Hanna. There were 4 desks. Another office was Darren Endyke at his own office. And then there was another office with, I believe, 3 desks, whereby it was the IT person that had a desk there. Maxwell had a desk there. And there was one more desk. I believe the woman's name was Helen Kim, who sat at that desk. Then there was I guess I said 4 before, there's actually 5 offices. Leslie Groff, who was Epstein's executive assistant, had her own office, and that was right outside of Epstein's office.
What was Ms. Helen Kim's role?
She might have been an assistant to Maxwell. I don't recall her specific role, but we didn't really overlap, so I'm not sure.
And you said the New York Strategy Group was closed down in 2012, and subsequently HBRK came into existence. Why did New York Strategy Group close, and why was HBRK set up thereafter?
I don't recall the reason why New York Strategy Group closed. New York Strategy Group, just to clarify the record, New York Strategy Group was dissolved, I believe, in 2012, but it stopped operations whereby it employed staff. I believe the last year was 2008. 2009 was the first year that both HBRK and DKI PLLC began to employ staff. I don't recall, or I don't know why the entities switched, but I was asked if I would be okay, along with Harry Beller, in setting up an entity that we owned, and I didn't have an issue, so that was where we operated out of HBRK Associates.
And who asked you to make that decision?
I believe it was either Epstein or Endyke. I don't recall.
And whose idea was it to name the company after yourself and Harry Beller?
I believe Epstein said, you guys are going to form a company. Why don't you pick a name? So I believe we decided, not Epstein or Endyke.
And Where, as in, backtrack. What office space did you operate out of when HBRK started?
So when HBRK started, we were still working at 457 Madison. At the time, 2009, Epstein was incarcerated, and the rent was very high. So we had a lease that was very expensive, and we were trying to break the lease. As Epstein was incarcerated and we were in a recession, we were trying to be more cost efficient. So I believe we continued working at 157 Madison until around May or June of 2010.
And where did you locate to after that?
For 2 years thereafter, both HBRK and DKI PLLC worked out of an apartment building at 301 East 66th Street.
And which apartment were you based out of inside of that building?
There were 2 apartments. I don't recall which one I was out of, but I know the 2 apartments were 10B and 10F.
And what was the layout of the apartments in which HBRK operated in?
HBRK's apartment was a 1-bedroom apartment, which had a living room, dining room, and 3 desks were set up. The 3 desks in the living room, dining room were Harry Beller, Emad Hanna, and at the time, William Murphy, but then we had a subsequent new IT person. And in the bedroom were Bella Klein and myself.
Did anyone live in this space, or is it primarily just an office space?
It was a residential space that was converted into an office. So at the time we were working there, there was no one living there.
And who suggested that you move to this space?
I presume Epstein, but I don't recall.
Do you know why you were asked to move to this space?
I think, as I mentioned earlier, the 457 Madison rent, I think it was $40,000 to $50,000 a month. It was a very fancy, elegant space that Epstein probably wanted for when he was there and dealing with clients, but he was not looking to spend that type of money when he was incarcerated, and we were just performing work on his behalf.
Were you aware that Mr. Epstein was affiliated with the 301 East 66th Street building?
I recall that Epstein was affiliated with 301. I know he has access to about 10 to 12 apartments. My understanding was that 301 East 66th Street was a co-op that tried to convert to a condo, and I guess I'd call it a failed conversion. And I don't know if Epstein put the deal together or knew the players involved, but I knew. But my understanding was that that was how he had access to some apartments.
Did Mr. Epstein pay the salaries for HBRK?
HBRK was an outside accounting and bookkeeping service, and on an annual basis, we would prepare a budget for the salaries, for the operating expenses, the rent, the office supplies, whatever costs we thought we would incur for the year, and we would bill Epstein, and he would usually pay our services for 1 year in advance.
And which entity of Mr. Epstein's would pay for these services 1 year in advance?
I don't recall. It could have been either 1 or 2 of his entities. It could have been his personal, which I believe it was, or maybe one of his businesses, but I don't recall exactly.
We'll get more into various entities later, but what was his personal entity?
It was just Jeffrey Epstein.
How did Mr. Epstein act around women in your presence?
I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. When you refer to women, are you referring to employees or assistants? Or
employees, assistants, other women you would have around him at any given time?
I didn't see anything out of the ordinary, but again, the cadence that I saw him was not very frequent. So I saw him every 3 weeks and never saw anything that seemed unusual or that anyone was ever under distress.
Did you ever witness Mr. Epstein receive a massage from any woman or girl?
No.
Did you ever witness Mr. Epstein have sexual contact of any kind with a young woman or girl?
No.
Mr. Epstein ever discuss sexual acts of any kind with you?
No.
Did he ever discuss getting any massages with you?
No.
Was it common for Mr. Epstein or Miss Maxwell to bring young women or girls to any other places where the two of you would meet?
The only place I ever met Epstein was at the office, 457 Madison, or his townhouse. So I'm not sure I understand the context of your question. There was no other places that I met Epstein or Maxwell.
Did he bring young women to those meetings?
Thank you, Jim. Occasionally there might be someone, when we met at Epstein's townhouse, we met in a dining room similar to a long table like this. And I would be in a meeting with Epstein. On occasion, an assistant might walk in for 30 seconds, say something to Epstein, and then leave. There was never any women present in my meetings with Epstein.
Did anyone check the date of births of any employees on the payroll?
When we received, I usually would hand out a employment package to new employees, and I would receive their information with date of birth. And if they were on the insurance plan, I would receive their personal information as well. In addition, when we prepared gift tax returns, if Epstein was reporting a taxable gift, we were required to know that individual's date of birth.
Did you verify those individuals' date of births?
In New York State, I believe that you're required to have working papers from either your school or from your parents if you're a minor. I never saw any working papers in New York, so I knew there were no minors that were working for Epstein on his payroll. And for the dates of birth, when we saw the gifts, there was nothing, that was alarming that stood out. So when you say, did I ever verify them? I wasn't in tune, saying was every date, making sure it was a minor, but I never saw a date of birth that was a minor, with the exception of potentially one gift that was to what I believe was a family friend of Epstein's.
And who was that family friend of Epstein's?
Epstein made gifts to, she was reported on his gift tax returns.
Do you recall what that gift was at the time? If it was a minor.
Yeah, I believe he purchased for her gift cards, American Express gift cards.
You know how much value was for those gift cards?
Probably somewhere in the $10,000 to $15,000 range.
Did you ever have any sexual contact with any young woman or girl introduced to you by Epstein or Maxwell?
No.
Did you ever receive any massages from any young woman or girl brought to you or introduced to you by Epstein and Maxwell?
No.
We will conclude our first hour there and go off the record.
All right, I'm gonna stop it here. Hold on. Let me get down here. So that's about an hour and 12 minutes. That's a long time of just sitting. But yeah. Anyway, so that's his accountant. All right. I will talk to y'all later. Have a good one. Bye.